Hello and welcome. This deep dive is particularly relevant for you, our listeners, connected with the HIV-RNA Test Guide podcast, especially given your focus on reliable HIV information and, access to testing through those, 4,500 plus labs nationwide. What if managing HIV wasn't just, about keeping the virus quiet? What if it was more about fundamentally shifting how our bodies respond to it? Thinking beyond the daily pills, even the newer long-acting shots.
Yeah, a different angle entirely.
Exactly. Like, what if we could actually fine-tune our immune system's interaction with HIV for even better control?
That's a fascinating prospect.
Okay, let's unpack what could be a really significant shift in HIV treatment. We're diving into JAK inhibitors now. These are a class of drugs you might have heard about for things like rheumatoid arthritis.
That's right, conditions like that. But now researchers are really looking hard at their potential to, maybe transform HIV care.
Right. And it feels like the right time to be talking about this.
It does. For decades, the main strategy, and a really successful one, has been directly attacking HIV with antiretroviral therapy, RT, suppressing the virus.
Absolutely. It's worked wonders.
But what's so interesting now is this kind of pivot, looking at our body's own response to HIV and thinking, can we adjust that for extra benefits?
So it's not just about the virus, but how our system handles it.
Precisely. The key insight here is that HIV actually, it hijacks our own immune communication system. It keeps it sort of in overdrive, even when the virus itself is suppressed by RT.
Okay. So even with undetectable virus, the immune system's still agitated.
Exactly. And that chronic inflammation can cause problems long term. JAK inhibitors, they offer a way to potentially dial that inflammation back down.
Got it. And that's why this is so relevant right now, isn't it? We've made these incredible strides with RT, but science is always looking for that next step.
Always evolving.
That next level of management, maybe even pushing towards, a functional cure. So our mission in this deep dive is pretty clear.
Yeah.
We want to understand what JAK inhibitors actually are, how they work inside our cells, the potential advantages they might offer people living with HIV, and where the research stands right now.
Okay.
We know folks listening are looking for clear, concise info on this stuff because it is evolving fast, and we're here to help guide through that.
Absolutely.
But before we get into the weeds on JAK inhibitors, it's just so vital to remember.
Yeah.
Knowing your own HIV status, that's the bedrock, isn't it? Regardless of any new treatments coming down the pipeline.
Couldn't agree more. Knowing your status is, it's the crucial first step. It gets you into care, onto treatment if needed. It's paramount, even as we explore these exciting new avenues.
Okay, so let's start with that basic question then. What exactly are JAK inhibitors? It sounds pretty technical.
It is cutting-edge science, yeah, but the core idea isn't too complicated. So JJ stands for Janus kinase.
Janus kinase, okay.
Think of JAKs as like a family of messengers or signalers inside our cells.
Inside the cells, got it.
Their main job is carrying signals from outside the cell membrane to the inside, to the nucleus usually. And these signals are really important for managing our immune system.
How so?
Well, they help regulate things like inflammation, how our immune cells respond to threats, cell growth. Basically, they're like the internal switchboard or communication network for our immune response.
Okay, internal communication network. I like that. So a JA inhibitor. What does it do to that network?
It blocks it. Simple as that, really. A JAK inhibitor is a drug that steps in and blocks those specific JK enzymes.
Stops signal.
Stops the signal from getting through. By blocking the JKs, the drug essentially dampens down the immune system's activity, turns down the volume, if you like.
Right.
And that's why they were first developed and are used for inflammatory conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, where the immune system is overactive and mistakenly attacking the body's own tissues.
Okay, so you're calming down an overactive immune system.
Precisely. So we're taking that tool, that strategy used for calming things down in one context, and now researchers are asking, could this be helpful in the context of HIV?
That makes a lot of sense. Borrowing a strategy. Are there specific JAK inhibitors already out there being used for these other conditions?
Oh, yes, definitely. There are several already approved by the FDA and other agencies for conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, certain cancers even.
Like which ones? People might recognize the names.
Sure. Drugs like Tofacitinib, the brand name is Xeljanz. Then there's Baricitinib, which is Olumiant, and Ruxolitinib, known as Jakafi.
Okay, I've heard of some of those.
Yeah, they're becoming more common. But the really key thing to stress here is that while they're approved for those other uses, Their use in HIV treatment is, right now, purely investigational.
Investigational, that's the word. Not approved for HIV yet.
Not approved for HIV. Researchers are actively studying if they can provide real, meaningful advantages for people living with HIV.
Okay, investigational, got it. So how does blocking these JAK pathways potentially help someone with HIV? Let's get into the science a bit more.
Right. This takes us into the really intricate ways HIV interacts with our immune system.
It's complex, isn't it?
It really is. We know that even when someone living with HIV is on effective ART and their viral load is undetectable in the blood.
Which is the goal of current treatment.
Absolutely, the primary goal. But even then, there can still be this sort of ongoing low-level immune activation bubbling away in their body.
Like a background hum.
That's a good way to put it. HIV kind of sets the immune system on high alert, and this persistent activation, even if it's low level, seems to contribute to long-term health issues, things like cardiovascular disease, certain cancers, maybe even faster aging.
So even when the virus is controlled, the immune system is still kind of agitated, maybe causing damage over time. And this is where that JAK-STAT pathway you mentioned comes in.
Exactly. The JAK-STAT pathway STAT stands for signal transducer and activator of transcription. But you don't need to remember that.
Okay, good.
The JAK-STAT pathway is just a central signaling route that manages inflammation and immune responses. And what's particularly relevant here is that HIV seems to exploit this very pathway to keep that inflammation simmering.
Ah, the virus uses our own system against us.
In a way, yes. So the thinking is, by blocking JAK with an inhibitor, we can potentially reduce this excessive immune activation that HIV triggers.
Makes sense. Any other potential benefits?
Well, yes. There's also some emerging evidence suggesting that JAK inhibitors might even play a role in suppressing HIV replication within those hidden pockets, those latent reservoirs we need to talk about.
Okay, reservoirs. We'll get to that.
And fundamentally, by tamping down that chronic inflammation, the hope is we can improve the long-term health outcomes for individuals living with HIV. Better heart health, less fatigue, maybe.
Okay, so it's not about hitting the virus directly like ART does. It's more about modulating the immune system's response to the virus, or the consequences of the virus being there.
That's a really good summary. It's adjusting the host response, which in turn could lead to several benefits.
You mentioned these latent reservoirs. This is a huge deal in HIV research, right? The main barrier to a cure.
It is indeed. It's probably the biggest barrier. Think of it like this. ART is great at silencing the virus that's actively copying itself in your bloodstream and most tissues.
Right, it stops the replication cycle.
But these latent reservoirs are like hidden funkers. They're mostly long-lived immune cells, resting CD4 plus T cells, where the HIV genetic material is just sitting there, dormant, integrated into the cell's own DNA.
Just hiding out.
Exactly. ART doesn't really touch these dormant viruses because it mostly works on actively replicating virus. And because these cells are long-lived, the reservoir persists for years, decades even.
And if someone stops RT.
The virus can wake up from these reservoirs, start replicating again, and the viral load rebounds. That's why RT has to be taken consistently, lifelong for most people currently.
So these reservoirs are the reason we talk about viral suppression rather than a cure right now.
Precisely. They're the major obstacle.
Okay. So how do JAK inhibitors potentially factor into tackling this huge problem?
This is where some of the real excitement in the research is. Certain JAK inhibitors, Ruxolitinib is one that's being studied quite a bit in this context.
It was JAK, right?
JAK, yes. They're being investigated for their potential to target these latent reservoirs in a couple of interesting ways. Well, one idea fits into what's called the kick and kill strategy.
Kick and kill? Sounds aggressive.
It does. The kick part means using a drug to gently wake up or reactivate the dormant virus within those reservoir cells.
Make it visible again?
Exactly. Make it visible to the immune system, or perhaps make the cell susceptible to other antiviral therapies. And some research suggests certain JAK inhibitors might have this kick effect.
So the JAK inhibitor potentially provides the kick?
Possibly, or contributes to it. And then the kill part would be handled either by the person's own immune system, maybe boosted by something else like a therapeutic vaccine, or by other drugs designed to eliminate those newly activated cells.
Interesting strategy. Flush them out of hiding.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And maybe separately, there's also research looking at whether JAK inhibitors could help suppress viral rebound if ART were stopped.
Wait, stopping ART? I thought that was dangerous.
It absolutely is, and this is really critical. This is purely in controlled research settings called analytical treatment interruptions, or ATIs. It is not a recommended practice for anyone managing HIV outside of a clinical trial.
Okay, strictly for research to understand mechanisms.
Strictly. The aim is just to see if the drug can help control the virus without standard RT for a period, to understand its potential impact on reservoirs and rebound.
Understood. And you also mentioned reducing inflammation earlier.
Yes, and that connects back too. By reducing that chronic immune activation and inflammation that persists even with ART, JAK inhibitors might indirectly make the reservoir environment less hospitable for the virus, or perhaps reduce the slow replenishment of the reservoir over time. It's all interconnected.
You mentioned a University of Pennsylvania study earlier. What did that find specifically?
Yeah, that was one of the earlier studies providing some encouraging signals. They looked at Ruxolitinib in people living with HIV who are already on RT.
What did they see?
They observed that the drug seemed to help manage certain markers of inflammation in the blood, and interestingly, they also saw some signs that it might influence viral gene expression or activation, even in people well suppressed on RT.
So hints that it was doing something relevant.
Exactly. Important early hints that this class of drugs could have an effect in this specific context, which helped pave the way for larger studies.
Okay, so what about those larger studies? Are there bigger clinical trials happening now to really test this out?
Yes, definitely. Things have moved forward. A really significant one is the Ruxolitinib trial. Its official name is ACTG A5386.
ACTG.
That's the AIDS Clinical Trials Group, a major research network.
Right.
So this trial, A5386, is specifically enrolling individuals living with HIV who are already on stable suppressive ART.
And what are they looking at?
They're examining the effects of adding Ruxolitinib to ART, looking closely at things like changes in immune activation markers, the size of that latent reservoir, and safety, of course.
And any early results?
Well, as we mentioned, some early data presented from this trial has shown promise. Things like reductions in some key markers of immune activation, while viral loads remained stable and suppressed.
That sounds positive.
It does sound positive, but it's really important to emphasize these are still early stage findings from an ongoing trial. We need the full data, longer-term follow-up to really understand the impact and safety.
Right. Cautious optimism, early days.
Yeah.
Need the final result.
Exactly. Can't jump to conclusions just yet.
Are other JAK inhibitors also being looked at? Or just Ruxolitinib?
No, others are definitely in the mix too. There are studies looking into Baricitinib, that's Olumiant,
Right.
especially in contexts like individuals who have both HIV and perhaps other co-infections where inflammation is a major issue. And beyond human trials, there have also been animal studies.
Like in monkeys?
Yes, using SIV, the simian equivalent of HIV, in monkey models. Some of those studies have shown encouraging results, like seeing reductions in viral load or reservoir markers when treated with JAK inhibitors.
So more pieces of the puzzle.
More pieces. Again, animal studies don't always translate directly to humans, but they provide valuable clues and support the rationale for the human clinical trials. It all points towards this being a promising avenue worth exploring further.
It really is fascinating seeing these drugs repurposed.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift perspective a bit. Think about the real-world impact.
Yep.
If these JAK inhibitors prove safe and effective, what could they actually mean for an individual living with HIV day-to-day?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? What's the so what? Well, picture someone, maybe they've been living with HIV for years, they're on effective ART, their viral load is undetectable, which is great.
The standard success story for ART.
Right. But maybe they still grapple with issues like persistent fatigue, or they know they have higher markers of inflammation, maybe early signs of cardiovascular issues, things that ART alone isn't fully addressing.
Okay.
In that kind of scenario, if we had a safe, well-tolerated JAK inhibitor specifically shown to work well alongside ART, it might offer some real additional benefits.
Such as?
It could potentially help to further reduce that nagging, persistent inflammation. And maybe, just maybe, that translates into feeling less fatigued, having more energy, improving their overall quality of life.
Beyond just the viral load number.
Exactly.
Yep.
Focusing on overall well-being. And there's also the longer-term possibility if these drugs can effectively manage inflammation and maybe even have some impact on the latent reservoir over time, could they contribute to delaying or preventing some of the long-term health complications associated with chronic HIV? Like heart disease or kidney problems.
So potentially improving not just how long people live, but how well they live.
That's the ultimate hope here, I think. Unlocking another layer of health and well-being, even for people who are already doing well on standard ART-NAT.
That really paints a hopeful picture. Now, we've been deep in the science of potential future treatments, but let's pull back to something absolutely fundamental. HIV testing. Why is knowing your status still so incredibly vital, even with all these potential advances?
Oh, it's everything. It's the starting point. Even with amazing progress in treatment, like JK inhibitors potentially being added down the line, knowing your HIV status remains the single most critical first step. Nothing else can happen without that knowledge.
Why is early detection so key?
Because early detection consistently leads to significantly better health outcomes. Full stop.
No matter what treatments are available now or later.
Exactly. When someone finds out they have HIV early, they can start ART sooner. And starting ART-T sooner does crucial things. It prevents major damage to their immune system, it dramatically reduces the risk of developing serious opportunistic infections, and it also means they can achieve viral suppression faster, which protects their own health and prevents transmission to others.
So the sooner you know.
The sooner you can take control of your health and access the life-saving treatments we already have. It sets you up for the best possible long-term health.
Absolutely clear. So what testing options are readily available for people these days?
There's several really good, reliable options. One common type is the HIV antibody test. This looks for the antibodies your body makes if it's infected with HIV.
How long after exposure do those work?
Generally, they become accurate a few weeks to maybe a couple of months after a potential exposure. The window period is typically cited as around 3 to 12 weeks for most antibody tests to be conclusive.
Okay. Is there anything faster?
Yes. For earlier detection, there's the HIV RNA test. This one's different. It looks for the virus's actual genetic material, the RNA, in the blood.
So it detects the virus itself, not the body's response.
Exactly. And because of that, it can detect an infection much earlier, sometimes as soon as 7 to 10 days after exposure. This is often what's used for viral load testing, too.
7 to 10 days, that's quick.
It's very useful for recent exposures or when you need a definitive answer quickly.
And getting tested, is it easier now than it used to be?
Oh, much easier. Access has improved a lot. There are convenient at-home sample collection kits now, which offer great privacy and ease.
How do those work?
Typically, you collect a small blood spot sample at home using a simple finger prick, then you mail it securely to a certified lab for testing. Results often come back quickly online or by phone.
That sounds really accessible.
It is. And besides the at-home options, confidential and affordable lab-based testing is widely available everywhere. Clinics, doctors' offices, dedicated testing centers across all 50 states. There really are good options for everyone.
That's good to hear. And for our listeners who might be thinking about getting tested or want more information on that RNA testing specifically, where's a reliable place they can go?
Yeah, absolutely. For anyone looking for quick, affordable, and confidential HIV testing right across the USA, a great resource is HIVRNatetestguide.com.
HIVRNaTestGuide.com.
That's right. They offer comprehensive information specifically about HIV RNA testing options, and you can easily find and access testing services near you, confidentially and reliably. It's a really straightforward way to get that crucial information.
Excellent. So HIVRNaTestGuide.com for fast, reliable testing info. Such an important message. Know your status.
It truly is the foundation.
Okay, let's swing back to JK inhibitors. We've talked about the potential upside. Now, we need to be balanced. What about the limitations, the potential downsides or risks people need to be aware of?
Absolutely essential to have that balanced view. Like any medication that modifies the immune system, JAK inhibitors come with potential risks.
The main one being?
The main one stems directly from how they work: immune suppression. While calming down an overactive immune system is the goal in HIV or arthritis, dialing back immune defenses can also increase the risk of developing other infections.
Like bacterial infections or maybe shingles, things like that.
Exactly. Opportunistic infections, reactivation of latent viruses like shingles, potentially, because the immune system isn't quite as vigilant. So careful monitoring for infections is really necessary when using these drugs.
Okay, so increased infection risk is a key consideration. What else?
Well, we also have to remember that the long-term safety profile, specifically in people living with HIV, is still being established. These drugs have been used for maybe 5-10 years in arthritis patients, but HIV is a chronic condition. People might be on them for decades alongside RT. We need more data on the very long-term effects in this specific population.
Makes sense. We don't have decades of data yet for HIV specifically.
Not yet. And it's also really crucial to keep hammering this home. JK inhibitors are not currently a replacement for standard ART.
Still need the antivirals.
Absolutely. They are only being explored as a potential add-on therapy, something used in addition to ART to get those extra benefits like reduced inflammation or reservoir impact.
Substitute.
Definitely not a substitute at this stage. And as we said before, they are not FDA approved for treating HIV yet. Their use should only happen under strict medical supervision within a clinical trial protocol.
Right. Don't go asking your doctor for them for HIV off-label.
Please don't. It's firmly in the research realm right now.
Okay, really important caveats there. Now, thinking bigger picture again, let's say the research pans out. JAK inhibitors do prove effective and safe enough to become part of HIV care. What are some of the broader, maybe global implications we'd need to think about?
That's a big question. If they prove beneficial, several major things come to mind. First, access and cost.
Always an issue with new therapies.
Always. There would immediately be questions about insurance coverage. Would insurers cover them for HIV? Especially initially if it's technically an off-label use before formal FDA approval specifically for HIV. That can be a hurdle.
Yeah.
And globally, ensuring access for people in lower-income countries would be a huge challenge. These are likely to be expensive drugs initially. How do we make sure they don't just benefit wealthy nations?
The equity question.
Exactly. We need to think hard about integrating them into existing global HIV care programs, negotiating pricing, ensuring supply chains. It's complex, involving global health organizations, governments, pharmaceutical companies.
A lot of logistical and economic hurdles beyond just the science.
A huge amount.
Okay. What about the ultimate goal, the pursuit of an HIV cure? Could JAK inhibitors actually move us closer to that?
This is where the potential gets really exciting, although still somewhat speculative.
Long game.
The long game, yes. As we've touched on, JAK inhibitors have this potential to, well, maybe reprogram the immune environment in helpful ways. And they might play a role in those kick-and-kill strategies or other strategies aimed at flushing out or permanently silencing those latent viral reservoirs.
So part of a combination approach.
Very likely. The feeling among many researchers is that a cure, whether functional or sterilizing, probably won't come from a single magic bullet. It's more likely to involve combining different approaches.
Like what?
Like maybe combining a JAK inhibitor to modulate the immune system and potentially kick the reservoir with something like a broadly neutralizing antibody or a therapeutic vaccine to handle the kill part, or perhaps even advanced gene editing tools like CRISPR someday to target the integrated virus.
Wow, really futuristic combinations.
It sounds futuristic, but labs are actively working on all these components. The hope is that by combining strategies, maybe reducing inflammation, waking the virus, boosting immune clearance, we could potentially achieve a state of remission where someone controls HIV without needing daily art. A functional cure.
Controlling HIV without daily meds. That would be revolutionary.
It would be the holy grail for many. It's definitely a long-term research effort, lots of unknowns still. But the progress in understanding the virus-host interaction and having tools like JAK inhibitors to potentially manipulate that interaction, it feels like significant progress is being made. It's a hopeful time in research.
Definitely sounds like it. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. To wrap things up, what are the main takeaways for our listeners from this deep dive on JAK inhibitors and HIV?
Okay, let's boil it down. First, JAK inhibitors, which you might know from arthritis treatment, are now being seriously investigated as a potential new type of approach for HIV, going beyond just viral suppression.
A new angle.
A new angle. They work by modulating the immune system, dialing down inflammation, and there's hope they might also impact that stubborn latent virus reservoir.
Okay, point two.
Second, clinical trials are happening right now, and the early results have shown some promise things like reduced immune activation. But crucially, these are early results. We need more data.
Got it. Early days.
Third, super important. They are not a cure yet, and they do have potential risks, mainly related to immune suppression that need careful study. They're not a replacement for current art.
Add-on, not replacement. Still research.
Exactly. And finally, maybe the most important point of all, despite all these exciting future possibilities, knowing your current HIV status through testing remains absolutely the crucial first step for your health today.
Couldn't say it better. And just to reiterate that vital point, if you want to take that first step or maybe get tested again, please do visit www.hivrnatestguide.com.
For fast, secure, and reliable HIV RNA testing options available anywhere in the USA. Right. Knowing your status really empowers you. It's the foundation.
It really is.
Yeah.
And, as this research into JAK inhibitors keeps moving forward, it really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How might this kind of approach fundamentally shift our whole understanding of living with and maybe someday overcoming HIV in the future?
It's a profound question. It suggests a future where treatment is even more personalized, targeting not just the virus, but the body's response, too.
Definitely something for us all to keep learning about and stay informed on. Thanks so much for walking us through all that today.
My pleasure.